Okay, so you wanted to dive deep into Gurdjieff.
We've got a whole stack of his lectures and conversations here.
Directly from the source, too.
Yeah, should be fun.
Some fascinating stuff in here.
Oh, yeah, some really fascinating and sometimes pretty challenging ideas about human potential and self-development and all that.
So Gurdjieff, just for those who might not know, was a spiritual teacher and philosopher.
Active in the early 20th century,
Right.
he had this really unique system. He drew from all sorts of different traditions.
Yeah, and really emphasized the idea of waking up.
Waking up from our sort of everyday sleepwalking,
Right, exact.
which I think we can all relate to.
He believed that most people live in this semi-conscious state, right?
Yeah, just reacting mechanically to life.
Instead of really acting with intention.
And he offered some pretty radical methods for kind of breaking free from that mechanicalness.
Yeah, and one of the first things that jumps out when you read Gurdjieff is this emphasis on self-observation.
Oh, yeah.
But he doesn't make it sound easy.
Not at all.
At all.
He calls it a function of the master,
Right.
like genuine self-observation.
So it's not just about, like, casually noticing your thoughts as they go by.
No, it's much deeper than that.
It's about something much deeper.
Exactly. He says most of what we call self-observation is really just imagining we see ourselves. It's like we're looking in a distorted mirror.
Okay, so what does genuine self-observation even look like then?
That is the question, isn't it?
What are we actually aiming for?
Well, Gurdjieff suggests that it requires a completely different quality of attention
Okay.
than we're used to.
Yeah, because I know when I try to observe my thoughts, it's like herding cats.
Oh, yeah.
They just scatter in every direction.
Well, he actually gives a really interesting starting point. He uses this example of a nervous, fidgety person
Okay.
who lacks authority because of all these unnecessary movements.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Right.
I'm a bit of a fidgeter myself.
Well, his advice is to make stopping these movements the idol of your efforts. Not saying it's easy,
Right.
but it's a tangible place to begin.
So it's like choosing one small thing, one habit,
Yeah.
and really focusing on transforming it.
Absolutely, like a microcosm of the larger work.
Right.
Precisely.
Exactly.
And he believed that even these small conscious efforts
Yeah.
can have this ripple effect on our whole being.
It's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And Gurdjieff was all about those small bites,
Right.
those seemingly insignificant efforts that over time can lead to real change.
Yeah. He even talks about excessive talking as one of those small things we can tackle.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He says it drains the weight for our words.
Which is so relevant today, right?
Oh my God.
With everyone constantly talking, sharing their opinions.
All the time.
It makes you wonder if we've lost the power of silence.
Yeah.
And truly meaningful communication.
For sure. I'm definitely guilty of over-talking sometimes.
I think we all are.
Yeah.
It's like my internal clock speeds up and I just can't stop the words from coming out.
And he even playfully promises, if you can overcome this habit, if you can learn to speak with intention and presence, he'll send help for the next step.
Oh, yeah. He does say that.
So it's like he's acknowledging that this work is difficult, but that there's support available if we're willing to make the effort.
Yeah, exactly. And that support might not come in some dramatic, obvious way.
Right.
It might be a subtle shift in our awareness.
Yeah.
A new insight that emerges when we least expect it.
Okay, now for something a little more challenging.
Okay.
Gurdjieff's views on suffering.
All right.
He actually saw it as a necessary part of development.
Okay.
That might seem counterintuitive to some people.
It might seem that way, but he makes this distinction between two types of suffering.
Okay.
There's unconscious suffering,
Okay.
which is like being hungry with no food available.
Right.
It's just a painful experience without any real purpose.
And then there's conscious suffering.
Right. Conscious suffering is the kind we choose.
Okay.
Like fasting, even though you have food available.
Got it.
It's about deliberately putting ourselves in situations that challenge our comfort zone and force us to grow.
It's like choosing to exercise, even though it's hard,
Yeah,
because we know it's ultimately good for us.
exactly. And Gurdjieff believed that conscious suffering, when undertaken with understanding, can actually create valuable substances within us. It's like the alchemists transforming lead into gold.
Right. So it's not about seeking out pain for its own sake, but about using difficult experiences as fuel for transformation.
Precisely. And this relates to his idea that internal conflict, the friction between different desires,
Yeah.
is actually what drives growth.
It's like no pain, no gain.
Yeah.
But applied to our inner world.
Exactly.
So if we avoid all discomfort, we're essentially avoiding the very experiences that could help us evolve.
That's the idea. And it challenges us to reevaluate our relationship with suffering, instead of seeing it as something to be avoided at all costs.
Yeah.
We can start to see it as a potential catalyst for growth.
So this is where Gurdjieff's analogy of the clock comes in, right?
Yeah, he talks about each person being born with this mainspring,
Okay.
wound to a certain length,
Right.
and that length represents our predetermined lifespan.
Okay.
But he doesn't stop there. He also introduces the idea that we have multiple springs
For different
for
centers.
different centers like our mind, our emotions, our body.
Right, so it's not just one big clock,
Right.
but a whole system of interconnected clocks,
Exactly.
each with its own energy and purpose.
And he makes this point that just as a clock spring can be unwound quickly or slowly,
Right.
we can extend the energy of these centers at different rates.
If we're constantly reacting, worrying, indulging in negative emotions, we're essentially speeding up the unwinding of our internal clock.
That's it.
It's like our smartphone battery. If we're constantly using energy-intensive apps, it drains much faster.
Perfect analogy.
Right.
And Gurdjieff is suggesting that by becoming more conscious of how we use our energy, we can actually slow down the unwinding of our internal clock. It's not about magically extending our lifespan, but about making the most of the time we have.
Okay, now let's talk about Gurdjieff's distinction between essence and personality.
Okay.
This is one of those ideas that really made me think.
Yeah, it's key to his teaching.
Yeah.
He says that essence is our inherent nature, the qualities we're born with.
Okay.
It's like our raw material, our potential.
And personality is...
Personality is the accumulation of all our experiences, our beliefs, our habits. It's the mask we wear, the persona we present to the world.
So essence is like who we are deep down, and personality is who we've become through conditioning and all these external influences.
Exactly. He uses the analogy of clothing,
Right.
We can put on different clothes, different personalities, depending on the situation. But underneath it all, our essence remains the same.
So while we might be able to change our personality through things like therapy or social pressure, real transformation involves working with our essence,
Yes.
the core of who we are.
That's the idea. And it's not an easy process. It requires a willingness to look deeply within ourselves, to confront our shadows, and to cultivate the qualities that are already present within our essence.
And one of the practices that Gurdjieff suggests for cultivating this self-knowledge is putting yourself in another's shoes.
Yes.
What's interesting is how he connects this to self-observation.
It's a powerful practice. He gives this relatable example of needing $100 but not being able to get it.
We've all been there,
And you're preoccupied, maybe even irritable.
right?
But then he challenges us to think about how that same situation might be affecting someone else's behavior.
Right,
Maybe the person who seems rude or impatient is actually just stressed about something we don't know about.
right. It's like that saying, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.
Exactly. And by consciously stepping outside our own immediate reactions,
Yeah.
we can start to see ourselves and others with more clarity and compassion.
So it's not just about understanding others, but it's also about understanding ourselves.
Absolutely.
By seeing how our own circumstances shape our behavior, we can become more aware of the patterns that drive us.
That's a great point. And this practice of putting yourself in another's shoes can help us break free from that egocentricity that Gurdjieff saw as a major obstacle to self-development.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about self-observation, the importance of small efforts, the role of suffering, and this distinction between essence and personality. And it's amazing how all these ideas connect back to this idea of waking up from our mechanical existence.
It's all part of a larger tapestry.
Right.
And as we continue to explore Gurdjieff's teachings,
Yeah.
we'll see how these threads weave together to create a truly transformative path.
And speaking of continuing our exploration, that's all the time we have for part 1 of our deep dives into Gurdjieff. But don't worry, we'll be back soon with part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into his ideas about conscious effort sleep and the possibility of extending human lifespan.
Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more interesting. Welcome back.
It's like we just scratched the surface of this whole waking up thing that Gurdjieff talks about.
Oh, totally. In the last part, we were talking about this idea that
Right.
we expend way more energy than we actually need to.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, where's all that energy going?
Well, he points out that we tense up muscles that we don't even need for a task.
Right.
Our thoughts just spiral out of control.
Right.
We overreact emotionally.
Yeah.
All this stuff that
Yeah.
just drains our energy without any real purpose.
Right. It's like we're running on a generator that's powering a whole bunch of unnecessary appliances.
That's a great analogy.
No wonder we're exhausted.
Exactly. And then he talks about this difference between
Right.
conscious effort and automatic effort.
Right.
Conscious effort is intentional. Like choosing to relax your shoulders or really listening in a conversation.
Right. Whereas automatic effort is just going through the motions, reacting habitually
Right.
without even realizing it.
And that's where all the energy leaks happen.
Right.
And he suggests that actually a lot of our suffering comes from this constant unconscious expenditure of energy. It's like we're slowly draining our internal battery without even knowing it.
Right. And that reminds me of something else that he talks about, like not giving into the body's demands for rest too easily.
Oh, yeah,
That seems counterintuitive,
it does.
but he actually believes that we can kind of build up more energy by pushing ourselves a little beyond our comfort zone.
Well, it's not about pushing yourself to the point of exhaustion or burnout or anything.
Right.
It's more about recognizing that our bodies often resist effort,
Right.
even when it's good for us.
Right.
We get comfortable in our routines and our habits, even if they're draining us.
So it's like our bodies are trying to conserve energy,
Yeah.
but that means staying stuck in a rut.
Yeah, and it takes conscious effort to break free from that.
Hmm.
He observed that if we could just learn to discern the language of our body from the language of our true will,
Right.
that we'd be able to make more conscious choices about when to rest and when to exert ourselves.
This makes me think about like those moments when I'm feeling super lazy and I just want to veg out on the couch. But then if I force myself to go for a walk or do something active, I actually end up feeling more energized.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
There
the-
is something to that. And that's Gurdjieff in a nutshell. He's challenging us to question our assumptions
Right.
and to experiment with different ways of being. He's not giving us a set of rules to follow blindly.
Yeah.
He's inviting us to become explorers of our own inner world.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about his views on sleep. He had some pretty unique ideas about what's actually happening when we sleep.
Oh yeah, this is where his teachings get really kind of mind-bending.
Okay.
Because he says sleep isn't just about resting our physical bodies.
All right.
It's about a temporary break in the connection between our different centers.
Hold on, different centers. You're going to have to explain that one.
Okay, so he talks about these different centers for thinking, feeling, moving, and so on.
Okay.
And these centers are constantly active even when we're asleep.
Okay, so we're not just this one homogeneous glob of consciousness. We're more like this complex system with different parts working together.
Exactly. And when we sleep deeply, the connections between these centers are severed,
Okay.
which allows the whole system to kind of recharge.
Oh, it's almost like our internal Wi-Fi goes offline so our mental and emotional batteries can fully recharge.
Haha, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And Gurdjieff suggests that if we could learn to fall asleep quickly and wake up fully refreshed, we could save a lot of time and energy.
Right. That makes sense. I know when I toss and turn for hours or wake up feeling groggy, it throws off my whole day.
Absolutely. And he believed that a lot of our sleep problems actually stem from that chronic tension we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
You know, all those unnecessary muscular contractions
Yeah.
that prevent our system from fully relaxing and recharging.
It's not just about getting enough hours of sleep. It's
Right.
also about the quality of our sleep.
Yes,
And how deeply we're able to disconnect from the day's activities.
precisely. He's encouraging us to become more aware of those subtle tensions that we carry throughout the day.
Right, like that tightness in our shoulders,
Yeah.
that clenched jaw.
Exactly. All signs that we're not fully present and relaxed.
Right. So learning to release those tensions is essential not just for saving energy, but also for improving the quality of our sleep.
Yeah.
Speaking of quality sleep, where do dreams fit into all of this?
Okay, so according to Gurdjieff, dreams occur when one or more of those connections between centers remain active during sleep.
Okay.
It's like one part of us is still observing the activity of another part, even though we're technically asleep.
So those vivid, action-packed dreams might actually be a sign that we're not fully resting.
Exactly. He even suggests that we often waste a lot of time in this kind of semi-conscious state, transitioning between sleep and waking.
Right.
It's like we're neither here nor there, just kind of drifting along.
Okay, so how do we gain more control over these connections between centers?
That's the question.
How do we learn to fall asleep quickly, sleep deeply, and wake up refreshed?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Gurdjieff did teach specific techniques for cultivating awareness and control over these inner processes, but it requires a lot of dedicated practice and self-observation.
Okay, so no quick fixes, no magic formulas.
I'm afraid not.
It's about putting in the work.
He emphasized that the first step is simply to become more aware of what's happening inside us. To notice those moments when we're tense or distracted or reacting automatically.
So it's like shining a light into the dark corners of our own minds and bodies.
Exactly.
Seeing those habitual patterns that we usually don't even notice.
Right, and by bringing those patterns into the light of awareness,
Yeah.
we can start to transform them.
Right.
We can start to make more conscious choices about how we use our energy,
Right.
how we respond to challenges, how we experience the world around us.
This is all starting to sound a lot like mindfulness, which is so popular these days.
Yeah, there are definitely parallels there.
All right.
But Gurdjieff's approach goes beyond just observing our thoughts and feelings.
Okay.
He's asking us to question our assumptions, to challenge our beliefs, and to actively work towards a higher level of being.
So it's not just about being mindful, it's about being intentional,
Yes,
using that awareness to actually change our behavior
right.
and our way of being in the world.
That's a great way to put it, and I think that's what makes Gurdjieff's teaching so relevant today.
Yeah,
He's offering us this path to not just personal growth,
right.
but to a more conscious and evolved humanity.
Right. And, speaking of evolution, one of the most intriguing aspects of his teachings is this idea about the possibility of extending human lifespan.
Yeah, this is where he really pushes the boundaries of conventional thinking.
Right.
He acknowledges that there are all sorts of theories and systems out there that claim to prolong life, but he offers a very different perspective.
He uses the analogy of a clock to explain this, right?
Yes, he says, imagine a clock with a mainspring wound to a certain length,
Okay.
and that length represents our predetermined lifespan.
Right.
But then he points out that we have multiple springs within us,
Right.
corresponding to our different centers.
Right.
And just like a clock spring can be unwound quickly or slowly, we can extend the energy of these centers at different rates.
So if we're constantly stressed out, overthinking everything, reacting emotionally, we're essentially burning through our lifespan faster.
That's the idea.
Wow.
He's suggesting that how we live, how we use our attention and energy directly affects how long we live.
Hmm.
He's not saying that we can magically add years to our life,
Okay.
but that we can slow down the rate at which we expend our energy.
So it's not about trying to live longer in the conventional sense.
Right.
It's about making the most of the time we have.
Exactly. It's about living more fully, more intensely,
Right.
not just adding years to our life, but adding life to our years.
But wait, didn't he also say that we can't actually change the length of our mainspring?
Yes.
That our basic lifespan is predetermined by our heredity?
He did say that.
Oh, okay.
But he also suggested that by working with our inner machine,
Right.
by becoming more conscious of how we use our energy,
Yeah.
we can optimize our lifespans, like taking good care of a car. You might not be able to change the make or model, but you can certainly extend its lifespan by driving it, carefully maintaining it regularly, and not pushing it beyond its limits.
So it's not about defying death. It's about living more consciously and fully within the limits of our given lifespan.
Right, and that brings us back to the importance of self-observation, of becoming aware of those habitual patterns that drain our energy. It's about recognizing those moments when we're reacting automatically instead of responding consciously.
Right. And it's about learning to direct our energy more intentionally, more purposefully.
Precisely, Gurdjieff's teachings are ultimately about waking up to our true potential, not just as individuals, but as human beings.
And that's a great place to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive, but don't go anywhere because in part 3, we'll explore even more of Gurdjieff's mind-blowing ideas, including his unique perspective on the nature of time and the potential for human evolution.
See you soon.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Gurdjieff.
It's been quite a journey.
I know, right? We've been unpacking some pretty profound concepts.
From self-observation to conscious suckering from sleep
Yeah,
to the idea of these multiple centers within us.
it's a lot.
It really is.
But it's all connected to this overarching theme of waking up, right?
Absolutely becoming more conscious.
Yes, more intentional in our lives.
Exactly.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Gurdjieff had some really interesting views on time.
I did.
I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, he believed that our usual understanding of time is very limited.
Okay.
Almost like looking at a flat two-dimensional image of something that's actually multidimensional.
Okay. Intriguing, but a little hard to grasp.
Right.
What did he mean by that?
Well, he pointed out that we tend to think of time as linear, right? Like a
Yeah.
straight line moving from past to present to future.
Makes sense.
But he suggested that there are other levels of time operating simultaneously.
So it's not just about the clock ticking away, it's about different dimensions of time interacting and influencing each other.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes me think about how time seems to fly when I'm engrossed in a creative project,
Yeah,
but drags on forever when I'm bored or anxious.
totally.
Was that what he was getting at?
Absolutely. He used this analogy of a clock to illustrate this.
Okay.
Imagine a clock with multiple hands,
Okay.
each moving at a different speed.
Yeah.
He said that's kind of like our internal experience of time.
So our intellectual center might be racing ahead while our emotional center is stuck in the past, and our physical body is just trying to keep up.
That's a great way to put it.
Thought right.
Yeah. And he believed that by becoming more conscious of these different time senses,
Okay.
we could actually start to harmonize them, to create a more unified experience of time.
It's like we're conductors trying to get all the different instruments in an orchestra to play in sync.
Yes, exactly.
So we're the conductor of our own internal orchestra.
And he even suggested that by mastering our internal time, we could access higher levels of consciousness,
Wow.
states of being that are beyond our usual limitations.
Okay, so it's not just about managing our time more efficiently. It's about fundamentally changing our relationship with time itself.
That's it. Time wasn't just something that happened to us. It
Okay,
was something that we could actively participate in
right.
and even influence.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we actually start to work with these different time senses and harmonize our internal clock?
He emphasized the importance of self-remembering,
Yeah,
which is about becoming more present,
right,
more aware of ourselves in the moment.
right.
Because when we're lost in thoughts or worries or daydreams,
Yeah.
we're essentially disconnected from the present moment, from the real flow of time.
So it's about waking up from that mental chatter that keeps us trapped in the past
Yeah,
or projecting us into the future.
exactly. And he taught specific techniques for cultivating self-remembering,
Like what?
like focusing our attention on our breath
Okay.
or on physical sensations or on a particular task.
So this is where meditation and mindfulness practices come in.
Yes, he saw these practices as essential tools for developing a more conscious relationship with time
Hmm.
and for accessing those higher states of being.
Okay, this is all so fascinating, but I have to admit, it's also a bit overwhelming.
It can be.
Gurdjieff is challenging us to completely rethink everything we thought we knew about ourselves and the world around us.
Well, he wasn't afraid to shake things up.
That's for sure.
But I think that's what makes his teaching so powerful. He's not just offering us a set of beliefs or dogmas.
Right.
He's inviting us to question everything,
Mm-hmm.
to experiment and to discover our own truth.
And that brings us to the final piece of this deep dive, Gurdjieff's ideas about the potential for human evolution.
Yeah, he believed that humanity is at a critical point in its development.
Okay.
He saw us as beings with incredible potential, but also with a tendency to sleepwalk through life,
Right.
to get caught up in our own egotism and mechanical reactions.
He didn't sugarcoat it.
No, he did not.
He's pretty blunt about the state of humanity.
But he also believed that we have the capacity to evolve,
Okay.
to transcend our limitations,
Yeah.
and to become something truly extraordinary.
So it's not a harmless situation.
No, not at all.
It's more like a call to action.
Exactly. And he believed that the key to this evolution lies in developing our consciousness,
Okay.
in waking up from our slumber and taking responsibility for our own growth.
And that's a process that involves all the things we've been talking about, right?
Yes.
Self-observation, conscious effort, working with our different centers,
Absolutely.
developing a new relationship with time.
It's a holistic path,
Right.
a way of life that encompasses every aspect of our being.
So this has been an incredible journey through Gurdjieff's teachings.
It really has.
We've covered so much ground, from the basics of self-observation to these really mind-bending ideas about time and human evolution.
And we've just scratched the surface.
I know, right? There's so much more.
So much more to explore in his work.
But hopefully this deep dive has given you a taste of the depth and complexity of his ideas.
I hope so.
And maybe even inspired you to continue your own exploration.
The real work begins now, as Gurdjieff might say.
Yeah, the journey of self-discovery is an ongoing adventure.
It is.
And there's really no limit to what we can achieve when we commit to waking up and living more consciously.
So true.
So keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deeper into the mysteries of your own being.
That's it.
That's all for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.